Okay, so thank you all for attending the Hemel St Albans Property Network. Any of you that haven't attended before, which would only be Richard at this point, welcome. I'm just going to go through just some house rules. Simply because I need to let you guys know that we are being recorded this evening, and it will then be available on our YouTube channel. So if you have told your other halves that you are somewhere where you shouldn't be, then just obviously change your names or don't have your cameras on. If you can keep yourself muted while the presentations are going on, I would really appreciate that. There's nothing worse than me hearing other people pour a glass of wine when I want one. Please put your questions in the chat box. There is no planned fire alarm this evening, so should your fire alarm go off, please make sure you leave by your nearest exit. And both myself and our presenter can't provide you any individual advice. It is just general advice on the topics. Like I say, all of our recordings go onto our YouTube channel, which is Hemel Property TV. So you can see any prior recordings that we've done as well on there. And there's a few webinars on there as well regarding the situations of EPCs, electrical certificates and things like that. Just to let you know, we are having our 10-year anniversary. Believe it or not, this has been going 9 years now, so next year it will be 10 years. And I will be holding an anniversary dinner. My guest speakers will be Jamie Lester and Paul Champlina. If you want to come along to that, tickets are available on our website. I won't hover over that for too long because there's only a few of us in the room. But what I will go on to quickly now is an eviction update. Now, obviously on Friday, we all heard the news that evictions were going to be extended. Now, what this really meant was that the courts were supposed to reopen yesterday and all proceedings were supposed to start commencing. The new pre-action protocol was supposed to be in place, so reactivation notices and things like that. That's now all a bit dormant, and basically from Friday, as we know, it's all changed. So what that means is courts now won't reopen until the 20th of September. No possession claims will be processed until this date, but what is important to know is you can still serve notice on your tenants, and you obviously can still put your claims into the court. The pre-action proceedings that I spoke about, which came in with Practice Direction 55C, are now dormant, so they're no longer valid, but it's possible that a similar process might be put in place when the courts reopen. So the notice periods, it's really important to know the notice periods of notices. So in March, when the Coronavirus Act came into force, notice periods for Section 21 and Section 8 were temporarily increased to 3 months notice across the board. Now that's in place until the 30th of September. What we heard in the update on Friday was that this notice period was going to be increased to 6 months. We know this is going to happen, but there's no implementation date for this yet. So at the moment, all notices remain at 3 months notice. So that hasn't changed. So if you're serving notices over the weekend or as of today, you are still only serving the 3 months notice. What's key to understand is the new rules are only temporary and they do not affect how courts will make an order with regards to possession if you're serving on mandatory grounds. So a Section 21 notice is mandatory eviction. The judge has no choice but to make an eviction as long as you've served it correctly. And Section 8, which is rent arrears, as long as you're serving under grounds 1 to 8, they're mandatory grounds and the judge has no choice but to award the eviction. Those haven't changed, that will still happen. However, they can be extended. So if your tenant can prove there's exceptional hardship, then the eviction process can be extended by 6 weeks. But that will mean that the tenant has got to put in an application to have that extended. So time limits, as I spoke about, a Section 21, it's really important to understand that a Section 21 only has a 6-month shelf life. So from the date you serve it, it's only live for 6 months. If you let that 6-month lapse, you cannot go to court and then ask the court to make possession on your property. You'd have to start from scratch and serve a brand new notice. So as I've put in the potential issues below, a Section 21 served prior to the 25th of March will now be invalid today, and a Section 8 served prior to the 25th of August last year will now be invalid. It's really important to understand that, because I know a lot of landlords have misunderstood what the closure of the courts have meant, and they believe that it's to do with the fact that they cannot serve notice. They can, and you can put your applications into court. That then stops the clock in regards to the 6-month shelf life. So just reiterating what I've said, there's no ban on serving notice. You can continue to do this. Claims in court, even though the courts are closed, you can still put your claims into the courts. One last thing that I will mention, which came as part of the announcement on Friday, is when the courts reopen, the cases will be prioritised and the most serious cases will be heard first. Those cases will be antisocial behaviour and other crimes, domestic violence, and rent arrears that currently sit at over a year, where the landlord is facing unmanageable debt. Now, we haven't had a full explanatory detail on this yet. We're waiting for that to be released. Because there's going to be a change in the law, and it will be the Deregulation Act that needs changing. That won't happen until Parliament resits from the 1st of September. At the moment, they're in recess, so no laws can be passed until that time. So once the 1st of September happens, that's when we should start seeing the wheels in motion with regards to when the 6-month notice period is going to be enforced from 3 months to 6, and what will mean with the prioritising of the more serious cases once the courts reopen. So has anybody got any questions for me regarding that? Because I didn't want to go into too much detail with that this evening. No? Okay. That's fine then. In which case, I will hand you over to Dami, and it's over to you.
Thanks, Julie. I have one question actually. Is the ban for 6 months, or is it an additional? Someone I know said 12 months. Is that what's the actual length of the ban?
So the length of the court closures, the courts will reopen again on the 20th of September.
Okay.
But evictions, basically the notice period has gone to 3 months and it remains at 3 months. But this could change. We don't know when, but they will be extended to 6 months, and that's the longest they can be extended to, because that's what the Coronavirus Act has put in place.
Okay. Fantastic. Awesome.
Okay. Anybody else got any questions on that? Because I know it's sort of been a bit all over the place, really. So many different media sources have reported different things. No? Okay, fantastic. Dami, it's over to you.
Okay, excellent. Just like to say good evening. First of all, thank you, Julie, for inviting me and having me on board. It's always a privilege to come and share. And yeah, hopefully the next 30 minutes I'll be able to provide some value and some return on interaction for you as you're spending this Tuesday evening at the Hemel Property Network. So yeah, I see some familiar faces. Hi, Roger. How are you? Hope you're well. I think I saw you just before lockdown, so hope you're keeping well. You're on mute, but it's okay. So I'll crack on with the presentation. So my name's Dami, and I'm here to talk to you about SSAS pensions, or SSAS investments, whichever way you want to see it or call it. Just out of interest, how many people have heard of a SSAS pension before? Just wave your hands, or cool, excellent. All right, so seems like about everybody. How many people have a SSAS pension? Okay, no one. Okay, cool. Okay, how many have thought about opening one and just haven't? Okay, cool, excellent, excellent. So hopefully I'll be able to provide you with yeah, just some more information on what a SSAS is. I'll go through who I am, talk a little bit about SSAS, and then if you have any questions for me, then I'll be more than happy to discuss with you. So first of all, I'm a husband and father to 3 beautiful daughters, so I'm outnumbered in the house. So it's always nice to come out and, or not come out, but, you know, talk to others, keep me sane. I own a few businesses. I've been a landlord since 2014, a property landlord since 2014. Predominantly, I have a few single lets. And at the beginning of this year, I also ventured into starting a deal sourcing business. Also at the beginning of this year, I opened up a my SASS, or in the process of getting all of that completed. So I'm now I am now a SSAS Trustee, and I have a SASS to my name. So yeah, so hopefully I'll be able to share some of my journey with you and kind of how I got to the decision of where I am today. I'm also a project manager. Currently, I do work for Network Rail. Yeah, so I also do some project management work on, on a daily basis. So I'm not a qualified advisor, as Julie mentioned. My thoughts are my own. Please always do, seek your own independent financial advice. It's just for me, I'm just here sharing with you what I've learned in my journey, and hopefully that will be of some value to you. So I always start with this slide, which is kind of the different pillars of wealth that you can tap into as an investor. You probably know most of these, but I'll just reiterate them again. So that the first being the home equity. So if you've got a home and you've got some equity in your property, you can obviously take that and use it to invest. Pensions being one, and particularly SSAS pensions. You can have investments, you can have your property portfolio, run a business. Maybe you have some intellectual property. So for example, if you got a book or something like that, and then joint ventures as well. So partnering up with other people to do, whether it's a business or whether it's a property development, JVs are also a fantastic pillar of wealth. So today we're going to be focusing on the second one, which is the pensions, and particularly SSAS pensions. So a SSAS is really, every time I hear people talk about this, a SSAS is it's not an incredibly sexy name from a marketing perspective. Like, what is a SSAS? Is it SAS, like, you're in the army or something? But no, it actually stands for Small Self-Administered Scheme. Others, I've also heard it called a director's pension, and I've also heard it called a landlord's pension. So a SSAS is effectively a small self-administered scheme, and it's a form of pension that exists for business owners. Okay, so it's not something that if you're just working or you're employed, you can't open a SSAS through your employment. You have to have a business or some form of business, or be a director on a business in order for you to access the SSAS. So yeah, so it's a small self-administered scheme, as I mentioned, and it's predominantly set up by the director. So whether that's whether it's a private or family-run business, it's usually set up for the benefits of the director and the senior employees within that business. The members of the SSAS, of the small self-administered scheme, they have full control and flexibility over the assets within the scheme, or the investment choices that they want to make within the scheme, which is one of the most powerful things about the SSAS, the control that you have. And I'll get into this a little bit more as I go on. It's also a very tax efficient. It's also a very tax efficient vehicle. Now, I'm not a tax advisor, but the tax breaks that you get from owning a SSAS, it's quite incredible, and I find it quite fascinating, because it's not, again, as someone who has been an employee for a number of years, it's not something that you get taught or exposed to. So when I started discovering all these little facts about the SSAS, it really kind of blew my mind away. So just to start off with, some of the key features of the SSAS, as you see on screen, is it's an occupational scheme, occupational pension scheme. The members are usually directors or employees of the business, which is referred to as a sponsoring employer. You can have up to 11 members in your SSAS trust. Okay, so for example, for myself, in my SSAS, I have a family of 5. So myself and my wife are currently trustees within the SSAS. As our children come of age, we'll be able to add them. Okay, so we'll have up to 5 people in our SSAS eventually. Now you can also join up with other families or other, let's say you're in a business with another person and you've had a really strong relationship over the years, and you know that, opening up a SSAS will just be beneficial because we already have this relationship and it'll benefit both families. So you can also join up with people outside your families, but the limit of the SSAS is you can have up to 11 people. As I mentioned, it's a very tax efficient environment, and more importantly, you have control of your investment decisions. And why this is important is because I don't know your backgrounds, or what you do, or if you own businesses or if you're employed. But if you've ever been employed and you've collected a pension through your employment, my relationship with my pension up until last year was that I would get a statement every year, and for 10 minutes I would review that statement and think, well, this has been okay. It's not great. It's not the best. It's not the worst. I'll file it away, and then I'll wait, another year for the next statement to come. And that's been my relationship with my pension, 10 minutes a year. Whereas when I started discovering about the SSAS and how much control you have, it really just kind of blew my mind. And so I've gone from someone who has a 10-minute relationship with their pension every year to someone who will be in full control of their pension once the pension providers decide to release my money. So those are the real key features of a SSAS. And later on, I'll also talk about the differences between a SSAS and a SIP. And I'm sure many of you have heard of a SIP, and maybe some of you actually already invest in a SIP. And interestingly, when you go to a lot of financial advisors, they tend to steer you in the direction of a SIP because it's easier and it's less complicated than having a SSAS. But if you're willing to go, to look beyond the advices of a financial advisor who just wants an easy life. Sorry if there's any financial advisors in here. I apologize. Then you can really go and get the benefits of having a SSAS. So like I said, it's an occupational pension. It's actually been around since 1973. So it's not something new. It's not something that just sprung up, over the last few years. It's been in existence before I was born, at least. So it's been in place since 1973. And more importantly, it's actually, and I think I've got it in one of the slides later on, it's HMRC who approve your SSAS to be created. And if it's HMRC approving it, they know about all these benefits. So this is not something that's hidden or anything like that. It's well known to HMRC. They govern it. And if you, there are rules surrounding SSAS, and if you breach those rules, there are heavy penalties. But just more importantly, is for you to know that it's something that HMRC know about. They approve the SSAS. If you were thinking of applying for one, you're applying directly to HMRC, and they will say yes or no whether you can have one or not. So usually, if you have a business, you're a director of the business, and the business is trading, then you're not going to have any problems. But they just do that check to make sure that everything is above board, because it is a very tax efficient vehicle, and they want to make sure it's being utilized in the right way and not being abused by people. So as I mentioned, I started hearing about SSASs probably about mid to the end of last year. And, as I mentioned before, I used to think, well, why isn't this shared, widely, or why isn't it widely known? And I guess, well, I'm coming from a place where I've been an employee, and it's only now that I've, started opening businesses and started attending networking events like this, and really networking and starting to get to know people that I started to hear of a SASS. So when I heard of it, when I heard that, I could use SASS, or I could use my pension in the form of a SASS to invest in property, I was just like, wow, okay. I mean, and the reason why that is I have two dormant pensions. Now, some of you may have worked in different organizations and you have pensions which are sitting there pretty much doing nothing. Okay, so you probably, like my pensions, they weren't doing more than, I went and checked, they weren't doing more than 5% a year, based on, after all fees were taken away and everything. And I wasn't paying any more into it anyway, because they were just from old companies. So, excuse me, those pensions were sitting there and not doing anything. So I thought, well, if I can use my pension to invest in property, why wouldn't I do it? It's a no-brainer. So, and that's kind of what started me on my SASS journey, because I had two pensions sitting there earning, less than 5% a year. And like I said, my relationship with it was just to look at the statement every year, no control, no visibility of what's, what my pension's been invested in. They give us all those generic options, high, medium, or so high risk, medium risk, or low risk. And they tell you, the younger you are, the more high risk you can go. The older you are, the lower the risk you want to take. And then you end up somewhere in the middle. That was my story with my pension. And I don't know if it resonates with any of you. So that's how I started that's where my journey began. And the thing with the SASS is, it's not something that you can, you can't just say, I want a SASS pension today and then tomorrow it's there. It is a process. It can be complicated. It doesn't need to be complicated, but it can be complicated depending on your situation. So for me, I had to, so my wife had a business. It was a VAT registered business. And that was the easiest way for me to become, or to show that I was the director of a company. So I got registered onto her business. I subsequently took over that business, by the way. And she allowed me, so that was fine. It wasn't a hostile takeover. So because it was VAT registered, it made it a bit easier as well. You don't have to be a VAT registered business, by the way, but it does make it easier, because the way HMRC sees it is, if you're a VAT registered business and you're sort of willingly paying tax, then you should be above board. But you can run a normal business which is not VAT registered, and you'll still be eligible as long as it's trading and you can show it's trading. Then you're fine. So I started my journey sort of, I guess, first of all, discovering, I started attending networking events which are specific for SASS, and discovering what people do, how people work with SASSes, how they collaborate. So there's a really strong sense of collaboration within SSAS Alliance members. So there's a group for SSAS Trustees, which is called SSAS Alliance, and there's a real sense of collaboration in those environments where people are joining up their SSASes to do developments, to do projects and things like that. So I started doing that research, and then earlier this year I put my application in. So I do now have my SSAS pension set up, but the next phase is now my providers releasing the funds and putting that money into my bank. So that's the battle I'm facing at the moment, but that's a story for another day. So yeah, and again, one of the reasons, as I mentioned, that I wanted a SSAS is because not just of the control, but I mentioned about the percentage increase that I was seeing on my pensions every year, less than 5% after fees were taken into consideration. And I was thinking, well, if I was able to control this money, I'm sure that I could do more than 5%, Even let's say, even if I did, if I went with a developer who was offering me 5% return on my investment over a 6-month period, for example, I only need to do 2 of those in 1 year, and I've already sort of I'm hitting 10% return on investment, which is double what my pension is doing, and that's just from one simple investment choice. there are many investment choices that you can have within a SSAS, which is another great benefit. And I'll talk about some of those in a bit. But yeah, you know, it's just that one option. I can you know, double what my current provider is doing, with, you know, less the fees and everything, right? So it was just a no-brainer for me. So some of the benefits of a SSAS as I've got on the screen. For an individual, you have control, as I mentioned, long-term returns. And of course, as with any investment portfolio, you can diversify. And it's really interesting, some of the things you can diversify your portfolio into being a SSAS trustee member. It's very tax efficient. As you all know, you can put 40K into your pensions personally every year. So if you have, for example, up to 11 people, you know, that's a lot of money that you can stash away into that pension. But guess what? You can also, and I'll come into it in a second, you can also give that money back to your business to reinvest, and then you can get it back into the SSAS pension. So you just create this sort of loop of money going around in the most tax efficient way possible. So it's really interesting. You can create a legacy, as I mentioned. When my children come of age, I'll put them onto our SSAS, and then thereby I will hand it over to them once we go. Okay, and because a SSAS is a trust. It's in a trust. It's governed by trust law, and trust law is one of the oldest form of laws that have existed in this country. Some of you might know about trust law much more than I do, but a SSAS is governed by trust law. So if you understand trust law, you understand how tax efficient it can be if you understand it and use it properly. So you can use it to create a legacy. It can provide enablement. As I mentioned, you can borrow from the SSAS into your business, and then use it to fuel whatever investments you want to do or however you want to grow your business. And then as you pay that money back, you know, you can just keep recycling it. And it creates multiple levels of compounding growth in your own economy, which was one of the draws for me. In your business, you can reduce corporation tax every year as contributions are made. You know, you can borrow money to purchase commercial property. So one of the things that I always get asked is, can I buy residential with a SSAS? You can't buy residential directly with a SSAS, but you can indirectly purchase residential, but you just have to be very careful. There are some things that you need to do, and your scheme administrator, if you decided to open one, would explain all of this to you, okay? But you can indirectly, because for example, if you wanted to do a commercial to resi project, and you bought the commercial property into your SSAS, you know, if you do the conversion, it becomes a residential property, and you can't hold a residential property in your SSAS. Otherwise you get, you know, like heavily penalized by HMRC up to like 40%. So there are certain things you need to put in place to make sure that you have disposed of the asset before it's deemed habitable, basically. If it's not deemed habitable, so it doesn't have a sink, it doesn't have a bathroom, you know, all of those things, then you're okay to hold it into your SSAS. But as soon as it has any of those things, you will be in trouble if that property is still in your SSAS. So there are ways around it. You can't purchase it directly into your SSAS. You can purchase it indirectly, but you just always have to make sure, for example, if you've got a commercial and you're doing it up to resi, whether it's, you know, you buy the commercial into your pension and then you transfer it to your business or something like that, you know, there are ways around it. So a lot of people think you can't, you know, they say, no, you can't buy residential. You can't buy it directly, but indirectly you can. There are ways you can circumvent that. As with any pension that you have, you get your tax-free lump sum. you get no income tax on any of the investments that you do, and there are many more benefits. So what else? So SSAS Alliance, I mentioned. There's engagement, there's collaboration, connection, investment opportunities, confidence. You get knowledge from that group, and you get application of knowledge as well. So in terms of the SSAS, I don't know how long I've got. Sorry, I do rabbit on, so apologies. I hope it's useful. As I mentioned, a SSAS is registered with HMRC. As you can see here, they do authorize your SSAS trust. As of the end of 2018, there were only 22,000 SSAS trustee holders. So that's, in a country of the size of UK, there are only 22,000 SSAS members. Now that might have gone up over the last 2 years, but you can see it's not really widely known or widely utilized. But if you can see beyond all the complications and all the complexities of it, it's a very unique and powerful tool. It's governed by the pensions regulator. You can have, as I mentioned, 11 people in a SSAS. You've got the lifetime allowance per person of up to 1.3 million. You can give your business loans. You can do commercial property investment. The 50% loan back to a sponsoring company is one of the major differences between a SSAS and a SIP. With a SIP, you're investing in a product. In a SSAS, you're almost running a business, and you can lend from your SSAS business to your sponsoring company or your business. You can lend that money to your business. So that's one of the key differences that you have between a SSAS and a SIP. You're in control of your investment decisions. You can do some form of leveraging. So you can leverage up to 50% of your fund. As I mentioned several times, it's very tax efficient and is based on the oldest form of law, which is trust law. And then you can buy your commercial office if you have one and lease it back to your company. So many creative things you can do. And interestingly, when you loan yourself money, so when you loan yourself money from your SSAS to your business, you determine the interest rates that you want to set. Yeah, you determine that interest rate. So if you want to make it 10%, you make it 10%. If you want to make it as low, it's got to be a certain percentage above the Bank of England rate. I think it's like 0.5% above or something like that. But beyond that, you're able to set your own interest rate. So you become a bank basically from your pension. So yeah. And finally, I don't know how long I've spoken for, sorry, Julie, but I'll just end with this anyway. So a lot of times, if you speak to a financial advisor, they will probably steer you in the direction of a SIP as opposed to a SSAS. And usually it's because of the complexities in a SSAS. It is true that you can pretty much do everything within a SIP that you can within a SSAS, but there are some very key differences, okay? And these differences are, for me, what make it worth having a SSAS, okay? So in terms of the differences, you're looking at a SIP as a product. You invest in a product, you don't really have control. So it's much like if you had a pension that your workplace provided for you. It's a product. You get invested into a product, you don't have control of it, and you don't have control of anything that happens within that product. If things go up, great. If it goes down, there's no accountability anywhere. A SSAS is a business. You have trustees within that business. You govern your investments, your investment choices. You do all of that. Okay, you take control of it. So if you really like the sound, if you like the idea of having control of your own pension and deciding where it goes, where you invest it, and how you want to diversify and all of those things, then that's one of the major differences between a SIP and a SSAS. The investment choices that you have within a SIP and a SSAS as well. I was on there was a SSAS there was a SASS conference earlier this year, and what they did was they got different SaaS investors to come and talk about what they were doing. And there was this one particular gentleman, some of his SaaS portfolio was invested in whiskey. So before whiskey is allowed to come onto the shelf, it must have been, and I learned all of this, by the way, at that conference. I don't know much about whiskey production, but before it's allowed to be on the shelves, it must have been stored away and I guess fermented or whatever it is for like 5 years, okay, in a casket, in like the whiskey caskets. And then it's got to be stored in a particular environment and all of these things. So you can actually invest some of your pension funds in whiskey. And I believe, if I remember correctly, I think you were looking at around maybe 25% return on your money over the 5-year period, which is not bad, yeah, over 5 years. And, you know, in terms of diversification of your portfolio, you know, you could take, I don't know, a percentage of your pension and put it into whiskey, right? You can invest in gold bullion, for example. I think you can do that within a SIP as well, the gold bit, but you can invest in gold. You can still invest in the markets if you want to invest in the markets. So you've got a myriad of investment choices that you can have. And of course, you've got the property options, which was my draw into the SaaS in the first place. It was the property side of it that drew me in. So yeah, you've got commercial, you've got you've got commercial directly and residential indirectly. You can still invest in the markets and stock markets and funds. And like I mentioned, other investments would be things like the whiskey that I talked about, collaboration and joint ventures. So you can join up with other SSAS trustee members, pull your funds together, do a project, or maybe just even borrow from a SSAS trustee. Or so, you know, for example, someone like myself, once my pension providers put the money in, you know, one of my strategies would be to loan it to other developers who will give me a fixed return on my investment. So that would be one, that would be a portion of my pension that I'll do that. So that's going to give me anything between, say, 7 to 10%, maybe even more, you know, on a 6-month, 12-month basis. Okay, and that will be a portion of my SaaS doing that. The other side of it, the other portion, I'll do something else with it. The costs are relatively lower. So relatively lower than you get when you have all these other, you know, the SIPs. It's relatively lower. You imagine you have 11 people in your trust, and you're only paying one sort of administration fee. You're not paying administration fees for 11 people. So the cost is lower significantly. Your work with advisors and professionals. So within a SaaS, you tend to have a scheme administrator. So one thing I wanted to mention is that with the scheme administrator, you need to do some research on your scheme administrator and the things they allow and don't allow. The whole purpose of you opening a SaaS is that you have control, you have full control, and you don't want your administrator to be the one who stops you from having full control. So you've got to make sure you pick the right administrator. My administrator, what would happen is I would take my investment to them that I want to do. They'll give me a risk analysis. They'll do some risk work on it and tell me if I'm, if, for example, I take to them that I want to buy residential, for example, and they do that risk analysis, they're going to give me a red flag because they're going to tell me that, the penalties are going to be too severe for you to do this. Okay. But if I took a commercial to resi to them, for example, then they'll assess it and they'll tell me, okay, at this point, you need to make sure that you've disposed of the asset from the from your pension in order to ensure that we don't fall foul of HMRC rules. So you've got to make sure that you have the right scheme administrator on board. Access and benefits, you get access to all your pension money, so, and you get to leave a legacy to your family members and your children, and really truly create that multi-generational wealth that we often talk about when we come into property. So some resources for you. So I told you that I started doing a lot of research myself. I started investigating about, you know, what truly can you do with a SaaS. So one of the greatest resources that I listened to was the Wealth Builders podcast. I've literally listened to every single podcast they have. Yeah, and pensions and SaaS is a big part of their formula. In fact, the 7 pillars of wealth that I gave you at the beginning, I got it from them. And you know, their podcast basically take you through all of those 7 pillars. So that's a great resource if you're into podcasts. If you're not so much into podcasts but you like books, then SaaS Pensions by Mark Stokes. That's a very good resource. It's a very comprehensive resource all about SaaS, what you can't do, and it will give you a really good grounding in terms of what you can and can't do. And then if you're interested, I'm a member of the SSAS Alliance. You can also join the SSAS Alliance. And again, you have a plethora of resources in the SSAS Alliance, which allow you to engage, communicate with other SSAS members, and also the wealth of information that's available there. So hopefully that's giving you some insight into a SaaS, what you can't do, the differences between a SIP and a SaaS. And I hope it's been of some value for your time tonight. And my contact details are on there. If you ever want to touch base or discuss anything, I'm more than happy to get on the phone and talk to anyone. Julie, that's me. I don't know if anyone has any questions. I hope I haven't gone over time. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, like I said in our emails together, this is really just a bit of a free for all, to be honest with you. There's no real time constraints. I'm just obviously mindful that maybe about 9 o'clock people might start to glaze over and maybe want their tea. I mean, that's fascinating to me, and I think, as most people will find with SaaS, there's so many different elements to it, and a lot of it on social media, probably only a quarter of that actually gets spoken about. The one thing I do want to ask you, and I know we said we weren't allowed to give personal advice, but it's not technically directly related. Right at the beginning of the slide, you said this was a director's pension, so it's linked to a limited company. Can you also do one if you have a CIC, which is a community interest company, because that is also a limited company in its own right, but it just isn't, it makes, you know what I mean, it's slightly different, the setup's different, but could you also use a SaaS against one of those?
You know what, that's a really good question. I don't know, because I've got a CIC as well. I've got a CIC, and I actually don't know. But it is a company, so, and you have directors on the CIC as well. So I would assume that, you would, as long as it's, I think the main thing is the business or whatever it is has to be trading, or has to show that it's trading. So if you're CIC, you're showing, that you are operating, because I don't think you can hold profits in a CIC. But if you show that you're operating and you've done accounts and all of that, I don't see why not. But it's a good question. I'm not 100% sure, but I can find out. I can definitely.
It's just that I've just started one, so I'm interested.
Okay.
To see where that goes moving forward.
Yeah, no, I can definitely find out. Let me just write it down. I'm looking for something to write it down on.
Did you not come prepared?
No, I've got my phone here, so yeah, I'll write it. But I don't see why not, because the CIC technically is still a company. It's slightly different. Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. I've got a question on the chat from Chris. I think that's because his internet, I think, keeps dipping out. It says, do you mind sharing who is your scheme administrator? Had you considered the landlord's pension as administrator? Oh,
yeah.
come inside.
My administrators, the Wealth Builders. So they're called. Sorry. Let me start again. My administrators are Empowered Pensions, who are from the wealth building community. So they're called Empowered Pensions, and yeah, they basically are my scheme administrators. Yeah.
Thanks. Does that answer your question, Chris?
Have you heard of them?
I haven't heard of them, no.
Okay, so there's a gentleman called Kevin Whelan,
Oh, I've
and
heard of him.
yeah, so he's basically the guy who sort of founded the Wealth Builder community, and he's kind of got an offshoot called Empowered Pensions, and they do you know, they're my scheme administrators, and they're quite good actually. They're a bit so you know, I'll tell you, it cost me £3,900 to set it all up. But you can claim that back from your pension once you get your funds all in, if that makes sense. So you can claim it back as an expense. I think there may be cheaper ones out there, I'm not sure. But again, you've just got to look at what the scheme administrators give you, because you don't want them to restrict you at the end of the day, because the reason why you're doing it is so you have control of your pension. So yeah.
Absolutely, thank you. Another question come through on the chat. Does the value of your pension matter in order to open a SSAS?
Not necessarily. I guess you just have to weigh up the like, as with anything, you have to weigh up the cost of opening it in relation to your fund value. So if you've got an existing pension and you want to transfer it over, then just weigh up the costs and the benefits. But I would always say it's worth having, because even if, you know, some people don't have a pension today, so even if you don't have a pension today, you could open it up, and if you have a property business, you could start you know, building that relationship between your SSAS and your property business, and, you know, create that money, get that money going round and round, so that you're operating in a very tax efficient way. So even if you don't have one, or the value of your fund is not great, I would personally say still open it, because you can grow that fund and you can grow that pot as your business develops.
Okay, and what sort of ongoing admin costs do you have to allow for with that?
It's about 1,000 every year, like £1,000 every year, thereabouts, for the scheme administrator. And yeah, you know, you get a couple of meetings in a year. You get a couple of board meetings in a year, and again, any investment that you want to do, you take it to them. They do the risk assessment, give you that, give you the feedback, and then that's really their work. Their work is not to stop you; it's just to ensure that you're within the regulations that HMRC provide, and so that, because if you fall foul of those regulations, the penalties are quite severe, and you don't want to be getting into those penalties. So and that's their job. So yeah.
Great, thank you. Has anybody else got any questions for Dami? No.
But those who are thinking of opening a SSAS, do you think it's something that sounds a bit more interesting at the moment, or you still have like reservations or doubts about it?
I mean, for me, it's certainly something. Since you've obviously done this presentation, I now feel more confident to go forward and look into actually starting one. Yes, and if I can find out if I can do it with the CIC, then for me that would be beneficial.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, no, I'll as I mentioned, I'm a part of the SSAS Alliance group, so I'll just jump on Facebook after this and ask the question: can a CIC open a SSAS? And if so, yeah, I'll let you know. Yeah.
Thank you.
Roger, you talking? You're on mute. Is Roger talking, Julie?
He's not on mute.
Can you hear him?
No. Roger, no one can hear you.
Maybe you can type it in the chat, Roger. We can't hear you. Can see you, but I can't hear you. Okay.
No. Okay.
No. Cool. All right. So that's all from me, I guess. And yeah, thank you once again, Julie, for giving me the opportunity to speak. And as I said, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out. And yeah, that's it. Over back to you, Julie.
Great, thanks. Thanks very much, everybody. So if nobody's got any further questions, I will bring the meeting to a close. And obviously just remind you that it will be on YouTube. I'll try and get that on tonight, but if not, that will go on tomorrow. All right, is that okay with everybody?
Yeah,
we
fantastic.
all done?
Yeah.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Dami. That was really
Thanks,
interesting.
Julie. Thanks, Dami.
Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.